In today's lecture, we will be talking about the prototype model, spiral model, incremental model, and the agile model of the software development lifecycle models. The first model is a prototype model. The prototype model actually requires, before you try to build an actual software system, here you try to carry out the development of the actual software, or a working prototype of the system has to be built. So that's actually called as a prototype model. And a prototype model is a toy implementation of the system. And it usually turns out to be a very crude version of the actual system. And you will be possible limited functional capabilities, low reliability, and inefficient performance as compared to the actual software. And in many instances, the client only has a general view of what is expected from the software product. And in such scenario, where there is an absence of detailed information regarding the input to the system, the processing needs, and the output requirement, the prototype model may be employed. So this is a kind of, this is how the prototype model actually works. So here you have two different developments. One is the prototype development, and the other one is the iterative development. So in the prototype development, you are able to find that the first phase is the requirement gathering and a quick decision, where you try to build a prototype. And then after you build a prototype, that is a toy implementation of the system, you try to have a customer evaluation of the prototype, and then the customer gives some kind of suggestions, and those suggestions are incorporated into the requirements gathering phase or the analysis phase. So now once there is a feedback, and then you try to refine your prototype that is being built, then it moves on to the next phase, that is the customer accepts the phase. That's actually called as it moves into the iterative development phase. And after the customer has accepted the requirements phase, then you go to the design phase. Then it is implemented, tested, and then maintenance. It moves on to the maintenance phase. So this is how the prototype model works. So as I told you, here you have the requirement gathering and analyst, and then a quick decision, build a prototype, assessment or user evaluation takes place, prototype refinement, and then engineer the product. So the advantages of prototype model is it reduces the risk of incorrect user requirement, because the user requirements is locked. After few steps of refining the refining stage, the user requirements will be locked at one stage. And good where requirement or changing or uncommitted, and regular visible process aids management takes place, and support early product marketing as well, and reduce maintenance costs, and errors can be detected much earlier as the system is made side by side. Disadvantage of prototype model is if you have an unstable or badly implemented prototype, then the final product is also going to be the same. And then it requires extensive customer collaboration. So every time the cost, whenever you wanted to have an extensive customer collaboration, and the cost also will be higher. It's difficult to finish if the customer withdraws in the middle. And it is also difficult to know how long the project will last. And the prototyping tools are also expensive, and special tools and techniques are required to build a prototype, and it is a time-consuming process. Next process model is a spiral model. So here the spiral model was initially proposed by Bowen, and is an evolutionary software process model that couples the iterative feature of prototyping with the control and systematic aspects of the linear sequential model. So here it implements the potential of for rapid development of new versions of the software. And using the spiral model, the software is developed in a series of incremental releases. And during the early iterations, the additional release may be a paper model or a prototype. And during later iterations, more and more complete version of the engineered products can be produced. So this is a diagram of the spiral model, where you have where you find that there is a division into the evaluation stage, product development stage, next phase planning, and object identification. So that's a 4-part division. So in the spiral itself is actually divided into 4 parts. The first one is the objective setting, where each cycle in the spiral starts with the identification of the purpose of that particular cycle. The various alternatives are also analyzed, and whether any constraints exist or not. Next part is the risk assessment and reduction, where the is to calculate whether there are various alternatives based on the goals and constraints. The focus of evaluation in this stage is located on the risk perception of the project. Next part is the development and validation, where there is a need to develop any strategies that can resolve any uncertainties and risk that is associated with the project. So in this part, the process may include activities like benchmarking, simulation, and prototyping. And the next part is the final step, which is the planning part, in which the choice is actually reviewed. And if it is determined or successful, whether it can actually move on to the next step of the project. So the risk-driven feature of the spiral model allows it to accommodate any mixture of a specification-oriented, prototype-oriented, simulation-oriented, or another type of approach. So the spiral model works for development as well as enhancement projects. So when should we use spiral model? So spiral model can be used when deliverance is required to be frequent, when the project is large, when requirements are unclear and complex, and when changes may occur at any time, and you have large and high budget projects. And the advantages of spiral model is huge amount of risk analysis and useful for large and commission and mission critical projects. And disadvantages is it can be costly model to use. Risk analysis is needed with high expertise and doesn't work well for smaller projects. Next one is the incremental model. Incremental model is a process of software development where requirements is divided into multiple standalone modules of the software development cycle. In this module, each module goes through the requirements, design, implementation, and testing phases. Every subsequent release of the module adds function to the previous release. So this is a diagram where you can see there is a requirement stage and there are different builds that are done, build 1, build 2, etc. up to build n. So at each and every build, we are able to find that there is a design and development. It goes into testing phase and then it moves on to implementation. So so at each and every build, there are these 3 steps which needs to be undergone. So in the requirements analysis phase, this is the first phase of the incremental model, and the product analysis expertise defines or identifies the requirements, and the system functional requirements are understood by the requirements analysis team. To develop the software under the incremental model, this phase performs a crucial role. Next phase is the design and development. In this phase of the incremental model of SDLC, the design of the system functionality and the development method are finished with success. When software develops a new practicality, the incremental model uses trial and development phase. Next phase is a testing phase, where you try to check the performance of each existing function as well as the additional functionality. So, and in the testing phase, the various methods are used to test the behavior of each task. And the next one is the implementation phase, where it enables the coding phase of the development system. It involves a final coding that design in the designing and development phase. And when should we use the incremental model? When the requirements are superior, a project has a lengthy development schedule, when software team are not very well skilled or trained, and when the customer demands a quick release of the product, when you can develop prioritized requirements first. Advantages is it's more flexible, it is easy to test and debug. It is simple to manage risk because there are different iterations which can be handled, and the client also gets important functionality early. Disadvantage is like you need good planning. The total cost is really going to be high, and well-defined module interfaces are required. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of the incremental model. So as incremental model has few disadvantages, we try to overcome them in the next model, which is the agile model. So agile model refers to a software development approach based on iterative development. An agile model breaks tasks into smaller iterations or parts that do not directly involve long-term planning. So every iteration requires only short-term planning. So the project scope and the requirements are laid down at the beginning of the development process, and the plans regarding the number of iterations, the duration and the scope of each iteration are clearly defined in advance. So in the agile model, each iteration is considered as a short time frame in the agile process model, which typically lasts from 1 to 4 weeks. And the division of the entire project into smaller parts help to minimize the project risk and to reduce the overall project delivery time requirements. And each iteration involves a team working through a full software development lifecycle, including planning, requirements analysis, designing, coding, and testing before a working product is demonstrated to the client. So here you are able to find that this is an agile model. So at each and every stage, say requirements analysis is the first stage, you have a brainstorm after that. And then during the design phase, you have the design document and the prototyping. And in the development phase, you have the small steps like iterations, demos, and also you need to have feedback with the clients as well. And then the quality is actually going to be assessed through iterations, demos, and feedback. And then at the deployment stage, production and technical support also will be taken into consideration. So this is the agile model representation. So the phases of agile model is the requirements gathering, then you design the requirements, construction and iteration, testing and quality assurance, deployment, and then you have the feedback. So these are all the phases of the agile model. And we have come to the end of the lecture. Thank you for watching the different models of the software process model. Thank you.